Welcome to Weekender at 5, where we bring you the biggest news headlines from New Zealand and India. My name is Preeti Garude and I'll be your host for this evening. Let's look at the main headlines of today. There are 89 new community cases in New Zealand. 83 of these cases are in Auckland and 4 are in the Waikato. 2 cases have been reported in Christchurch yesterday, but COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins said this afternoon that Cabinet has decided to keep the region at alert level 2. There are 37 people in the hospital and 5 in ICU. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has said that Christchurch is not out of the woods yet, but the advice that they have received is that the new cases in the city can be managed under alert level 2 settings. The announcement comes after 2 cases were confirmed in Christchurch earlier today. Both the Christchurch cases are from the same household. One travelled to Auckland to provide childcare and had 2 negative tests, one before travelling to Auckland and a second one before returning to Christchurch. Both cases became unwell last week, were tested on Tuesday this week, and both positive results were returned last night. Both these cases are unvaccinated. The second case is a truck driver who was driving around Christchurch area, plus some trips just outside of the city. The government has announced changes to the MIQ today, with stays halving from 14 to 7 days, followed by isolation at home for 3 days. Under the new MIQ regime, which will begin from 14th of November, arrivals must be fully vaccinated and will be tested on days 0, 3 and 6 and undertake a rapid antigen test before leaving MIQ before a day 9 test at home. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins said this will free up about 1,500 rooms a month in MIQ. Some of this will be taken up by community cases, but some will go into the booking system for travellers from overseas. The second step will open the border to low-risk travellers from the Pacific nations without isolation. This one-way quarantine-free travel will begin from 8th of November. The New Zealand Union of Students Association and students across New Zealand have welcomed government's announcement last week of the COVID-19 protection framework, which will bring certainty to the tertiary sector. However, it cautions that the engagement with the sector will be crucial to ensuring the framework is successful. Its members across the country have been engaging with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health about what the new framework may look like in the tertiary settings. You can read the full story on indianweekender.co.nz. Now for some Bollywood news. Speculations are hot with the wedding of Vicky Kaushal of the Uri fame and Katrina Kaif's wedding in the first week of December. News outlets in India are reporting wedding bells for the 2 superstars, which will be held in Rajasthan in the first week of December. Moving to the interview segment of this evening. Today, we're talking to the mother-daughter duo Jayshri and Laxmi Ganda, authors of the award-winning cookbook, A Little Bit of This, A Little Bit of That. With 4,000 copies sold to date and winning Best in the World in 2 categories at the 2018 Gourmand World Cookbook Awards, the journey of mother-daughter Jayshri and Laxmi has been a triumphant one, and one that has taken them completely by surprise. Let's find out more. Thank you so much for joining me, Jayshri and Ms. Ganda. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on Indian Weekender at 5 and having a chat with me about your book, which is called A Little Bit of This, A Little Bit of That, which I found was extremely intriguing. And the bio that I had received about the book, which was about, which was your experience, Jayshri, I believe, where you would call up your mom and ask her whether, how to make a certain recipe. And she'd be like, oh yeah, put a little bit of this and put a little bit of that. And that resonated with me so much because that's what my mom does. And then my question to her is like, but what is this little bit? Like, what do you mean? Is that what you faced, Jayshri?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a common thing in our community or culture that whenever we bring our mums, it's always a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Yeah. And what about you, Mrs. Ganda? Did you feel like that was something that you just thought that Jayshri will understand, like what that means?
Oh, that's what I said, a little bit. What's a little bit? Pinch? Big pinch? Small pinch?
And is that and is that where the idea of the book came about? Is that how it developed into wanting to put together these recipes?
The book actually came about from my own wanting to learn the Indian recipes and cooking. And I said to Mum, look, you've got some time on your hands. Do you want to teach me? I'll come round and we'll do it in the kitchen. The cookbook wasn't really the end goal at that point. It was just learning. And when I was chatting to friends afterwards and they said, what have you been up to, Jay? And I said, Mum's teaching me in the kitchen everything. And I'm writing it all down. So I've got it recorded and I'll be able to know. And oh, God, can we have copies? And so then afterwards I said to Mum, so many people want copies of this. Perhaps we should put a cookbook together. And that's where that kind of journey started.
Oh, wow. That's excellent. And I'm sure, Mrs. Ganda, that would have been quite a unique experience for the two of you to be spending that time together, just bringing all of everything alive, having stories of or recipes that have been passed on through generations and bringing those alive. Was that something that you felt was really important, that you wanted to sort of, obviously every mum does feel that, but that was something important to you that you wanted to pass along to your daughter as well?
That's right, because if she wasn't cook, she can be first one on the pot or eating, cooking, no, never come in the kitchen. And when she come to me, she want to learn. I was quite surprised with it. So that's how we meet.
Yeah.
Oh, she want to learn. She want to learn all about spices. I don't know anything about spices. So that's how we started.
Yeah. And how is that experience for you, Jayshri?
It was incredible. There was times where in her masala, in her spice container, she'd have all these spices. I'm like, Mum, what's this? She's like, oh, it's this. And she'd say it in Gujarati. And I'd be like, well, what is that in English? She's like, I don't know. We just call it dana or jiro. Yeah. And even that she knew what they both were, but they looked the same to me. So she just knew. And now I can sniff them and, oh, yeah, there's dana, coriander, and oh, that's jiro, that's cumin. But prior to that, I had no knowledge of spices or anything like that.
And that's one of the things that you mentioned within the information that I had was as well, which was that you're bringing with these recipes, you're bringing alive the Gujarati as well as having it mixed up with the Kiwi flavor, the ones that work for New Zealanders. Is that something that you consciously set apart to do?
Actually, you're right. No, it was conscious because when I started developing the book idea, it was always going to be a balance of Kiwi Indian. And so even one of the recipes in there, we've got a lamb mince pie, but obviously it's made a curry mince pie. And so that's not very, traditional to Gujarati cuisine, but it's something we used to have every Saturday night. We'd play hockey on Saturdays, and Saturday nights Mum would always do curry mince pie or kimo pie. And so I wanted to put those things in there because I felt it would, people would understand it and appreciate it coming from New Zealand.
Yeah. And so within the book, let's talk about the book a little bit. So now how many recipes do you have in the book?
There's over 100 recipes.
Okay. And that's across, say, like a starter to a main to a dinner, or divided across all different food times, I guess you say, eating times?
Yeah, so we sectioned it all off and we started with starters and snacks like samosas or pakoras or whatever, and then we got into the main, which was just separated out into fish. Afterwards, even me and Mum were like, oh, we didn't put that recipe in and we didn't put that recipe in. But we had to, when publishing, keep it to a certain quantity. Yeah.
And I know that you mentioned that, the idea was just to have all of these recipes together and you didn't really expect it to go crazy as it has. So were you expecting all of, because I understand that, you received the Best Indian Cuisine Book Award and the Best Spices and Herbs Book Award. Was that something that you, in your wildest dream, thought that you would get?
Never in our wildest dreams. It was never the intention. Just we wanted to create it, share it with our community, which we did via a Facebook page as we were cooking. And then when it was published, people jumped on and said, I want copies. And when I released it, the amount of copies that were bought overnight, and me, Mum and Dad would spend all weekend packing the orders. We're like, oh my God, it's gone crazy. And then the Gourmet Cookbook Awards, well, yeah, that was everything that sort of happened has just been a big surprise to us.
Yeah. And Mrs. Ganda, so is that, what are your friends saying about the fact that, that you're, that you have a cookbook now to your name? So are your friends all like, oh, can you tell me about this recipe? And can you tell me about that recipe as well?
Yeah, some people's very proud what Jayshri did for community.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so pleased. Yeah.
And
everyone is making it. A lot of people suggest a lot of recipes. Like Jayshri said, we want to put a lot more recipes. We couldn't fit it in. There's just so many we can do.
Yeah.
We can keep going, really.
And so now what next for the two of you now? Are you going to include the other recipes that you have excluded from all of this? Or are you going to look at looking at different cuisines, or are you going to stick to Gujarati flavor? What is it? Have you planned for what next now?
No. Well, I'm always ringing up Mum every day, whether it's to talk about what we're cooking for dinner, but I'm always coming up with ideas. I'm like, oh, Mum, I think people might be interested in fusion cuisine. Like I made a dal one day, but instead of putting water, I put in bone broth for a healthy version. And then we talk about having our spice mixes put together. And yeah, we're always excited about talking about things, but nothing set in action just yet. So watch the space, really.
Yeah.
I won't be surprised. You've got another ideas, wouldn't it?
And that would be something that would be really exciting, because I feel like the food culture in New Zealand as such is evolving quite a bit, and it has evolved so much since, I believe, even you, like Mrs. Ganda, since, you moved here, or since even like throughout with Jayshri growing up as well, the food culture has evolved so much. And I feel that it's evolved in the past 5 years within itself. It's evolved quite a bit. Do you feel like there is more of a global influence that is coming towards Indian food as such, or within the Kiwi food culture as well? Do you reckon that, Jayshri? And then I'll ask Mrs. Gandha about the same thing.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. Like I think about, I've got some cousins in UK, and curry is the national dish here. But growing up in New Zealand, I mean, samosas weren't even known. It was, back in the 80s and 90s, people just didn't know about Indian food. And now they're intrigued, and they're like, oh my God, can you give us a recipe for this? Or, oh, I love butter chicken, or whatever it is. They're fascinated. And the amount of Kiwis that have bought the cookbook who love the fresh Indian cuisine that the Gujarati brings, as opposed to the creamy curry. So, yeah, it's been an eye-opener, and I love how it's expanded out.
Yeah. And what about you, Mrs. Ganda? You would have actually seen, since you've, since I do believe that you arrived in New Zealand, what was that, mid-80s or 90s?
Yeah, 70, 72, yeah, 72. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you would have seen a complete transformation.
Nothing was around. Hardly anything. We had to come to Auckland to buy our spices, I remember. There's nothing in Christchurch.
Oh gosh, so you were in Christchurch in the 70s. So okay, yeah.
Yeah, I arrived in Christchurch. Yeah. But I was really lucky with my mother-in-laws and father-in-law, because they had everything what they can buy. So I was very lucky, because I'd be lost without my curry. Because
yeah, certainly. And one last thing, I think the one last question that I have for you is that where can people find this book? Tell us where to get this book.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a website, and it's simply www.gujaraticookbook.com.
All right.
For that for sale, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, both of you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I quite enjoyed getting a peek into the Gujarati flavor and Gujarati food conversation that I always cherish. So thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the success of the book.